So, Bismillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Jazakallah khairan. Again, welcome back to this podcast series on evolution from the Burhan Institute. And in this series, the objective is to explore the intricate landscape between science and Islam, and especially between Islam and evolution. So the idea is to navigate the field, to give clarity, hopefully, in that space. So I'll be playing the host. As a co-host, I have Dr. Kamal Dingle, Associate Professor at the Gulf University of Science and Technology, who has a degree in applied mathematics and quantitative biology. And we have the privilege today to have you, Dr. Muzaffar Iqbal, and I believe you have a degree in chemistry, but besides that degree, you took quite a few prestigious office positions. So I just picked two of them. I have that in Pakistan, you were the director of scientific information at the Ministerial Standing Committee on Science and Technological Cooperation of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. That's one. And then when you went back to Canada, you became director of the Science and Religion course program at the Center of Technology and Natural Sciences at Berkeley. And currently, so you're still in Canada, and you're the founder and the running president of the Center for Islamic Sciences. And as a noticeable work, I have you as the general editor of the Integrated Encyclopedia of the Qur'an in 2 volumes, and I believe the second volume came out not too long ago in 2024. So may Allah put barakah in it. Jazakallah khairan. And the way we'll go through the podcast, if you can summarize maybe the main argument about evolution in maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then we can go through questions and answers. If you want, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulika al-Kareem. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Bismillah, mashallah, this is a great effort that you are making to bring to a wider audience the questions which even the questions are misunderstood, because I had asked you in response to your question, what is evolution to you? And you didn't respond to that question. But let me just go ahead and frame the question, because before answers can be given, questions themselves need to be understood properly. Because evolution means different things to different people. And because evolution, specifically, we are talking about biological evolution. Specifically, we are talking about a field of study that came into existence recently. By recently, my time frame is very long. So by recently, I mean specifically the 19th century, specifically with the publication of The Origin of Species. In order to respond to your question, my position on evolution, I would frame the question by saying that I'm responding to a very specific kind of evolution, I assume, that came into existence, the theory of evolution, with Darwin's publication of The Origin of Species. And thereafter, there has been numerous reiterations of this theory until it became a scientific fact, so to speak, for many people. And now it has reached, at least in the Western world, it has reached a status of an established reality that we all came from a common denominator, you and me and all the prophets, upon them peace. They all came from this common soup, I call it. So if this is the evolution we're talking about, if this is the question that is the main question here, then my answers would be as follows. Muslim response to this particular kind of evolution has also evolved over the last now almost 170 years. When this theory came to the Muslim world, most of the Muslim world, as you know, was under colonization. There was no science in the Muslim world. There were no scientists in the Muslim world at that time. And this, I will just tap this into your other question as well. Has the situation changed? Obviously, it has changed, but I'll address to that. So the question of evolution arrived in the Muslim lands along with many other imported ideas and imported theories and social theories, historical theories. All kinds of material started coming into the Muslim world, into the Muslim mind. to people who had, by and large, no science left. They had no education system left. So middle of the 19th century was a time of extreme darkness, one could say, in the Muslim world. So when we talk about Islamic response to evolution, we talk about Muslim response to evolution, because Islam does not speak but from the tongue of Muslims. Islam is not a living being in the sense of articulating itself through a Zoom session, for instance. So we are talking about Muslim responses too, and Muslim responses came from people who did not understand. I have said this many times, and I think this was one of your other questions. Muslims did not understand the 19th century Muslim word, Sayyid Ahmad Khan in the subcontinent, and likewise in Turkey and other places. They had no idea what they are talking about. It was something that came as a package, and the package contained the following. Muslims have fallen behind in the production of knowledge. We are backwards. We have to learn science in order to compete with the West. The West has colonized us because we fell behind in our scientific understanding. But we had a great scientific history. We have produced tremendous amount of science, and we invented everything, and then everything is also in the Quran. Haven't you heard that Quran says over and over, go out and discover the realities, go out and find out? Haven't you seen, haven't you read Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad? Likewise, haven't you heard, that is the history, but haven't you heard how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Afala yanzuruna ilal ibili kayfa khuliqat. So go out and do your physiology and do your biology. This is what the Quran says. And haven't you heard that the Prophet ﷺ said that go and gain knowledge even if you have to go to China, although that is not a hadith. So we started to quote and produce verse after verse after verse of the Quran in order to justify, and also in many cases with good intentions, to inspire Muslims to get scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge in the 19th century was the knowledge that came from the Western world. There was no native science left. There is a debate in the history of science about when was the end of the Islamic scientific tradition. I won't go into the details of that debate, but regardless of when we say is the cut-off time of that great scientific enterprise that is still, and I want to make it very clear and emphatic, Islamic scientific tradition in the history of science is still the longest scientific tradition that humankind has. No matter how we want to end its demise, at whatever date we want to end, we know that in the middle of the 15th century, the highest level of astronomical research was happening in Maraga. We have documentary evidence. We have the letter of Jamsheduddin Kashani, or Kashi. He's named both ways. The letter is sent to his father from Samarkand when he arrived in Samarkand, and how he describes the scene of madrasa under Ulugh Beg. This is like, there are two letters. Professor Edward Kennedy discovered the first one, and he published it in 1960. Letter of Jamsheduddin Kashani to his father in Kashan, back to Iran. And just imagine, a letter written in Samarkand travels how? The Queen doesn't have the postal system established yet. How does it travel? It travels with the caravan. It arrives in Kashan, and the letter is just full of details. And among those details is the detail of how many rigorous tests Jamsheduddin Kashani had to go through to prove that he is a real astronomer. He's a real mathematician. Like, there are people who would question, okay, this young man comes here from Iran. What does he know about mathematics? We are great scholars of mathematics. We've been here for 20 years, 10 years. This young man comes. So they put him to test. And one of the greatest examples of his genius was that Ulugh Beg said, look, we are Hanafis. We want to establish a time of Asr prayer. Can you make a hole in this tunnel, which I have seen myself? This is the Samarkand observatory that was there. The hole is still there. I've seen it with my own eyes, from which the light will come in at the time of Asr, according to the mazhab of Imam Abu Hanifa. Only this ray of light will come through this tunnel at the time of Asr. And many other questions were put forward to him. So what I'm saying is that we know that in the 15th century, the highest level of astronomical research was happening in Samarkand. Likewise, Maraga, likewise other very established, well-established proofs of the activity, Islamic scientific activity of science within the Islamic civilization. So we can say, okay, it started in the 8th century and it ended in the 16th century or 17th century, whenever we want to cut off. Nevertheless, the point is that the longest scientific enterprise is within the Islamic civilization. The next thing is that somewhere in the 17th century, and people blamed the burning of the observatory in Istanbul to be a proof that Islam, not Muslims, Islam itself is against science, which is just, people like Toby Huff. They understand, sociologists. They have no idea what Islam is. They have no understanding of scientific enterprise in Islam, but they make a fatwa. They give a fatwa. Islam is against scientific inquiry, but look what they did to the observatory. That observatory was burned not because Muslims, the Turks, were against scientific inquiry. It was burned because when you use an observatory to do astrology rather than astronomy, it creates real significance problems for Muslims, because now you are aligning the planners to tell the Sultan, if you wait for your expedition until these stars or planets line up, then you'll be victorious, because this is the knowledge that we have received from this observing the planets. So there were other things which were the main reason for burning of that observatory. Nevertheless, scientific enterprises do not die with the burning of one single observatory. That's absurd. So we know that that's not the subject right now, why and when Islamic scientific tradition came to an end. But we can say with a degree of confidence that by the 17th century, there was very little left, and following century, it was totally destroyed. It just disappeared. Not only science, that's another thing. I have done some research on how many tafasirs were written in our project on the Encyclopedia of the Qur'an. If you look at the trajectory of the tafsir tradition, we see a decline after the 17th century. There are exceptions here and there, but the tradition itself suffered tremendously, and I call it implosion of Islamic civilization. And like all civilizations, no civilization is going to stay forever. And Islamic civilization is not an exception to that rule, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sunnah, He has a custom, He has laws. If we don't observe those laws, then we will go down. And that's what has happened. Again, another subject. The point I'm trying to establish here is that the first responses of Muslims to evolution were emotional, psychologically constructed, with total ignorance of what Darwin was saying, in the absence of any scientific understanding of the theory. Obviously, we are not in 1857, in 2026. And over the course of these centuries, situation has changed, tremendously changed, but fundamentals do not change. Yani, if we look at the history, or if we look at the evolution of theory of evolution, it has changed tremendously. But its fundamental premise is still the same, that there is a common denominator, there is a common soup. And Muslims, obviously, as you know, have come up with certain variants of the same theory, including exception of Adam alayhi salam, Adamic exception. They say, okay, everything came through the evolution, but Adam alayhi salam. Some Muslims say, no, even Adam alayhi salam you cannot make an exception because that is ad hoc, that's illogical. But it was the decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Excuse me. Now let me say something very categorical. And I'm not a mufti, I'm not going to issue a fatwa. But I am going to say that this is the well-established position of the ulama, that anyone who believes that there is no hand of God in any process, not just evolution, in any process, that takes that person outside the pale of Islam. Because that is a sarih, that is a qati, that is a well-established aqidah, that's a well-established ruling based on the Qur'an. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Khaliq, is the creator of everything, not just you and me, but everything. Now, if he is the creator and we accept this mechanistic view that first there was the Big Bang, and we don't need to inquire about how the Big Bang came, but the Big Bang came, and then we have matter. And once we have matter, we can make anything out of it, including you and me. So if the trajectory is like that, and some people would say, well, let's not put God into it. Let's just look at it without putting that additional factor, because we're just dealing with science. We're not dealing with Ilahiyat. That was your other question about metaphysics. Ilahiyat, metaphysics, is something that needs to be understood properly from the perspective of one scholar. You had asked about Dr. Nasser's position, but I want to make it broader in the sense of what do we mean by metaphysics is something in the Islamic terminology, Ilahiyat, not just in Aristotelian terminology, but in Islamic terminology. That means something related to the Creator himself, something related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. There are two things that we need to be extremely clear about. One, and these are fundamentals, like you cannot reduce the question of evolution to any further simplification. And that is, where did the life come from? The beginning of life. How did life begin in the first place? Number two, second fundamental is this world in which you and I and everybody is living, this whole cosmos. How did this come into existence? And this is a very old human question. Now, Aristotle, he was a great philosopher, obviously. We haven't been able to get rid of him after all these centuries. But he made two fundamental mistakes. When he, in his physics, the first book of physics, when he was grappling with the question of origins, he said matter exists. If something exists, it has to come into existence at some point. If we assume that matter came into existence at some point, it must have come into existence from another substance. That means that substance had to exist before matter came into existence. But for that substance to exist, that substance must have come out of some other substance. And for that substance to exist, that must have come from another substance up unto infinity. And he says that is absurd. He said the only solution to this is that matter was eternal. Matter always existed. This is number one. This is one of the fundamentals of Aristotelian worldview, that matter was eternal, it always existed. Number two, once you have the matter, life can be brought out of that matter through a number of various mechanisms. And Darwin was very smart. He took one of those possibilities and he made a theory out of it for the existence of life. Now, when we go down the road of these two essentials, and this is not the first time, 2026 April is not the first time we are talking about. Aristotle came to the Islamic civilization way back through the translation movement, as we all know. When those camel loads of Greek philosophy and science arrived in Baghdad, what happened? We have a documentary history of the translation movement that started under the patronage of who? Not the ulama, but the ruling classes. The ruling classes in Baghdad were the main patrons of the translation movement, in which we take great pride. And we have constructed this Baitul Hikmah, the house of wisdom, in our imaginations. And we have repeated this over and over, and came from your country, actually. Phrase of house of wisdom was a British man's imagination that he wrote in passing. And then it was just taken up by Muslims who were always psychologically just deficient of finding some way of standing up. Because, our psychology has been damaged deeply. Ibn Khaldun said that when a people are subjugated by another people, their psychology is damaged and they want to imitate the conqueror. They want to be like the conqueror. And he has many examples. Among them is the tulip revolution and things like that. So Muslims, when we were colonized, we wanted to be more white than the white people. We want to be more English than the English people, etc. And then they brought their own education system. So we were and we still are in a great need for lollipops, for children who want chocolate, more chocolate, more chocolate. We want to prove that no, we are not backward. We also had a great past, and we had this Baitul Hikmah, and we could produce this and that, and we have no. Even actually, Darwin is just a second-rate person, because Rumi and even Ibn Khaldun and Muscovy and all those people were first who proposed the theory of evolution. Darwin is just down the road. We were the first ones. So if we look at all those claims coming from the people, especially in the 19th century, 20th century, even now there are people who believe that Muslims were the first to propose the theory of evolution. They understand neither history of science, they understand nothing. This is a psychological makeup. Let me stand up. I am so, look at my state. People can come and bomb me out of my existence and nobody moves a finger. But I have to have some kind of psychological energy to be able to just exist. And my psychological energy comes from made up history. I can just imagine there was a Baitul Hikmah, great knowledge was translated, and we produced great scholars. And even Razi, like this paper that just came last week, somebody sitting in UK now from Dubai is proposing that Razi is the one who was the first to give us the theory of evolution, because he does not, this person understands nothing about Razi. And Razi is a great mind, one of the geniuses that any civilization has ever produced. And he will come up with this question, fihi masail. Every single ayah, even every single phrase in the Quran, fihi masail, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like he would have 20 questions about one particular aspect of one ayah. In order to read Razi, you have to learn how to read Razi. So that's one of the other things that we are dealing with today, is that we are reading back into history, into Muslim history, something that did not exist there, and we want to create evolution within the Islamic thought. And in order to do that, we have to actually superimpose our mental habits, our limitations onto the classical texts. And this is the new phase of Muslim evolution. This is the
I
phase
believe
of
you.
Muslim evolution. Sayyid
I believe you.
Ahmad
You've coined.
yeah,
Sorry, you've coined the term the precursiorism, isn't it?
precursorism. Yes, I wrote that
Yes.
article on precursorism. Why precursorism is such a virus that has just penetrated the whole body of Muslim psyche. Precursorism is when we want to see precedent within our own tradition for something that just came into existence yesterday. And the reason we do that is psychological, not historical, not even obviously not scientific. So you have all these people who say, no, it's not the Wright brothers who developed the flying machine. We were the first one, because haven't you heard of Ibn Farnas? Ibn Farnas in Morocco, he went on a mountain, and he had these wings attached to himself, and he jumped from the mountain. Obviously, he broke his back. But but even if we assume, and this is a fictional character, even if we assume that he was real, that wasn't a flying machine that Wright brothers invented to give us aeroplanes. So we have all kinds of, the genius we have, energy we have put into these fabrications of inventing backwards our own, because psychological forces are very powerful. Like, they are extremely powerful. They drive human beings, and they drive cultures, and they drive civilizations to some extent. So coming back to the evolution, what I've said so far is that the idea of evolution within the Muslim framework has also evolved from the 19th century up until the present. The trajectory is very clear, that we had politicians, journalists, reformers, all of whom wanted Muslims to stand up, and they saw in Western science the only cure that they thought would clear, would help them. So they responded to evolution by saying, Now, the ulama, I want to say something I haven't said about that either. The other camp was equally ignorant of the scientific knowledge. And then they caricatured the theory of evolution into apes becoming human beings. And they said, this is kufr. This is unbelief. Like you are saying, we were apes and then we became. So they didn't understand, and their responses were not informed either. As a result, we have generations of Muslims living in the occupied lands of Islam in the middle of the 19th century up until the time of their so-called independence. There is no real independence. The Second World War produced country after country, artificial countries that had never existed in history. But it was the remaking of the Muslim world in the image of the colonizers in a new form, because now physical occupation had become very expensive. So they devised a new system of colonization after the Second World War and gave birth to 57 Muslim countries. You mentioned my position at this OIC, uh, that tiger paper organization they created in 1969 in response to the Al-Aqsa Masjid. When I was there, I realized that these people who are running the show now in the Muslim world, they have no interest in Islam or Muslims. They are just puppets. So that's why I resigned from that place, because that was supposed to create scientific and technological cooperation between the 57 Muslim countries. And they would have conference after conference after conference. They would come, they would have great time, and they go home. Nothing would happen. And when I tried to do something, it was just very clear, no, it's not possible, because the framework is not there. And then, although the need is there for, and I'm not against science per se, because science, and this is where I'm going now, science as an enterprise is a civilizational activity, meaning enterprise of science is always anchored within a civilization. You can do science in your apartment if you want, but even that apartment is in a city, and that city is in a country, and that country is in a certain place, etc. It has a history. So one cannot have the enterprise of science, especially modern science, as an independent freelance activity. If we accept that, that means not only just theory of evolution, but the entire enterprise of science, as we know it today, came out of a certain civilization. Now, civilizations have worldviews. Every civilization has a worldview. The problem we have today to understand theory of evolution or science itself is that there is nothing else left. Like if you have total darkness, you cannot see anything. You have to have something other to compare. Meaning, if there was another enterprise of science fundamentally different from the Western science, if there was another living tradition of science that is based on a different set of higher order worldviews, including where did the world come from, did the cosmos come from, fundamental, meaning if we have non-Aristotelian view of the matter itself, of the cosmos itself, and a whole enterprise of science based on that worldview, then we will be able to say, okay, they say this and we say this. They say this and we say this. But because the NMR machine that I saw in the university in Medina is exactly the same that is sitting in Washington, D.C., and they are both doing exactly the same thing. There is no other worldview left. Everything has been obliterated with the power of not only just the modern science, but also the technologies it has produced, mostly by the technologies, because if a B-52 bomber can go and create this crater in such a faraway place, I mean, there is nothing the other side has to compare this kind of power that is being projected, and this is all based on the modern science. So the power of modern science is just, even in the conversation we are having, obviously, it's all based on modern science. It's all based on technologies which have come out of the discoveries of modern science. Because modern science has practically proved itself to be so utilitarian and so powerful to the entire humanity, it has wiped out other ways of existence. It has wiped out not just remove. This Heisenberg, Werner Heisenberg, who gave us this wonderful theory of indetermination. He wrote a book in 1957 in which he says he was very perceptive. He said that societies where modern science will arrive, I'm paraphrasing, would have hard time adjusting to the ways which are inseparable from the science itself. So if generations of English men and women have lived through a gradual process of change brought by the discoveries of modern science, they have had time, he said, to adjust to the changing sociological, psychological, actual landscape of their lives. But when Sayyid Ahmad Khan arrived in London, when he arrived in London to get one of the lowest civil awards from the Queen, he says in his travelogue, in his autobiography as well, he had to borrow money to travel. But when he arrived in England, he saw these clean streets, he saw street lamps, he saw this order, he saw that system is working so efficiently. He wrote a book called Muzaffar in London. It's a book in Urdu, this is his travelogue, in which he says that compared to the English, the most cultured of our men are like a dog. These are his words. This is Sayyid Ahmad Khan, who is the leader par excellence, who is the model of the 19th century Muslim subcontinent. He's the one who started the Aligarh University. He's the one whose whole effort, like he made great efforts to establish British education system in the subcontinent, and like the entire subcontinental educated class, including myself, we are all product of that system that he created. And this was his view of his own culture and his own people. When he saw why was he so impressed? Because streets were clean. There were these street lamps. Buses were running. Postal system was running. Like he was just so impressed by that. Heisenberg was right that when that change happened in the Western civilization gradually, generation after generation, things changed. Digestion and acceptance was a natural process. For the Muslims, just like the shock Sayyid Ahmad Khan received, we are no different even now. After 150 years, 170 years, we're no different. Because there is not a single place in the Muslim world where there is anything other than modern science in terms of science. That means we are living within the worldview of modern Western science, in which foundational pillars are the Big Bang and the evolutionary theory. These are the two foundations. Now, the question then arises, why are these two problematics? From the perspective of Islam, if I could say something about that, unless you have some, I think I've spoken enough. You have some questions?
I mean, I guess we'll ask you to answer these questions specifically also.
Yes.
That they'll come up. Kamal, go ahead.
I'm including all of your questions in my talk so that they become organically related, because what is metaphysics and have the situation changed? I think I've answered both of those questions. Yes, the situation has changed. Now, what we are, yeah.
So maybe, yes, if we can continue on the topic of metaphysics, because I assume some of our listeners might not even know what metaphysics really entails.
Right. So I mentioned that one of the very important aspect of any question is to question the question itself. Meaning, we need to look at the question itself. When we say metaphysics, what do we mean? And I said, let's talk about Ilahiyat. Let's talk about, let's bring the question within the Islamic framework, because metaphysics is a very non-Islamic term. So there was physics. Everything was physics for Aristotle. Everything was physics. What didn't come into physics, he said, this is metaphysics. And when Aristotle arrived in the Arab culture, people like Ibn Sina, who was a great scientist, who was a great thinker, was a great philosopher. But when they had to deal with metaphysics, they invented a whole layer of meta discourse based on what they call Ilahiyat. This is related to a superimposed layer of views upon the physical world. So metaphysical means meta is what is above or higher or outside physics. Physics is everything to deal with the material world. Now, when we bring this into the Quranic worldview, and this is where I think we can also combine the previous thought that I had about Aristotle not being able to solve the question of beginning. Where did the matter come from? If the matter is eternal, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternal, then we have two eternals. This is shirk. This is an impossibility for Islam to have two eternals, because there is none other than Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything, maswa Allah, everything other than Allah is perishing, is a creation, is a time-bound entity. No matter who, no matter what level, what ikram, what honor that other being has, everything, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kullu shayin halikun illa wajh. Everything is perishing except His face. Huwal awwalu wal akhir wal zahir wal batinu. He is the first and the last, and the manifest and the hidden. There is none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because as human beings we cannot conceive, we cannot comprehend His being, laysa kamithlihi shay, there is none like Him, meaning human capacity to have the idrak, have the perception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an impossibility as a being. So Ilahiyat, metaphysics, then deals with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the science of understanding the world through the Creator. It is a science, it's a very well organized science that takes what is beyond physics, what is beyond the physical world, to understand the physical world. It is totally opposite direction from the modern worldview, where we take the physical, we look at the physical to go beyond the physical. If we reverse our gaze, if we start from the non-physical, we have a hierarchy of laws, we have a worldview that in which the physical enters existence, in which the existence begins with the Creator Himself, who is the first and the last, who is the creator of everything, who brings into creation. And when we say that, automatically we have another factor in this equation. You know what that factor is? If we go from the metaphysics, that factor is the factor of time. When we say something was created, the very first thing is when. It did not exist. That's how Aristotle started. Because if he could not solve the issue of matter, where did it come from? Because when we say where did it come from, we also mean when did it come from. Is that clear that when and where are together? Like when we say, well, I was born in 1954, meaning I did not exist in this world before 1954. There is my existence has a time. When we say this cosmos came into existence, this physical world came into existence, at some point we already have a time. Does that
Yeah.
yeah? Now, when we say that this creation happened at a given time, that means there was a time then when there was no physical existence. There was nothing called the physics. There was no physical being per se. So when it came into existence, then the Quranic worldview is that everything that is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is time bound. There is already a clock ticking for that thing to expire, to be obliterated. This includes human beings, we die. This includes civilizations die. It includes in the entire generations, they die. And it includes the whole cosmos. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها. Everything thing is going to disappear one day because it was created. Now, if the matter was eternal, as Aristotle said, then there is no death to it. It's illogical to conceive of the physical cosmos that was eternal, that it will come to an end. Eternal beings do not come to an end. So Ilahiyat, metaphysics, give us the correct perspective to look at the physics, to look at the physical beings, because now we have a framework to look at. Like, if you're driving a car, somebody designed the car. If you're outside the car, you are able to see the mechanisms if you open the hood from outside, but when you're driving the car, you don't see. So you have to be outside the system to observe the system.
So do you mean that the issue today is because you try to use like modern science to explain what is beyond science? By principle, it doesn't matter.
So
It doesn't make
that
sense
is another
because you
very
cannot see
important. Yes,
beyond it.
that is a very important aspect, and we are starting actually a course on al-Mabadi al-Ashara, the 10 foundational principles, in which one of the principles is the boundary of a subject. Every branch of knowledge has prescribed boundaries. Like we say, ilmul fiqh deals with the laws, the fiqh, right? The understanding of the Sharia. We say history deals with people and places and things that existed. We say mathematics, you have degree in mathematics. What does mathematics deal with?
Number, shape, and space is what I was told.
Right. So every branch of knowledge has prescribed legitimate domain of inquiry, except, we say, the science. Because now scientists tell us how life began. Scientists tell us how the cosmos began. Scientists tell us which color would go well with your temperament. Scientists tell us which food is the best for you. Scientists tell us which drug will be good for your heartbeat. Like we have given to the scientists not only what was due to them, but far more, because the power of science has obliterated all other epistemic claims of every other branch of knowledge.
Scientism, yeah.
Okay.
Scientism means that we look at everything. So when we come to the question of evolution, when we come to the question of the beginning of life, where do we go? To science,
Right.
which is overstepping the boundaries of the branch of knowledge called science. Because this is a question of metaphysics. It's not a question of science. Science, for example, the medical science, for example, the study of the cells, study of the body, can tell us things like, I'm so amazed by I put my finger through the table saw one day. And I went to the hospital, and the doctors had things on their screen about the minutest detail of my finger. Every single bone, every single nerve, everything was known to them. And the doctor could pinpoint what was damaged. This is an amazing accumulation of actual physical processes of the body. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us, have you not seen how we made these fingertips? You see, that is a different order of question. And the greatest proof that we have against this scientific worldview is the following. And this is not a scientific proof. This is a metaphysical proof. And Muslims, as I said, we have a deep psychological deficiency of many kinds, but one of the deficiencies is obviously the size. So we put the Big Bang in the Qur'an. My greatest argument is the following. I take your example. I take your theory of Big Bang. I take the theory of evolution. I take everything as you say. Now tell me, can you prove through use of Big Bang and everything that the earth came into existence through this process, etc.? Can that your theory give you mountains which will do the tasbih with one of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Either you deny that there is no actual articulation. Would your theory of evolution give you ants which would tell that to other ants, wait, run, Sulaiman alayhi salam is coming, run away for your life? Would those ants, would your theory of evolution tell the bee, as Imam Ghazali tells us in Jawahir al-Quran, to construct hexagonal cells? Like, can you imagine that? All species of bees have been constructing beehives. Individual cells are hexagonal. The angle is 107.4 degrees. This is the only geometrical shape, and you are a mathematician, only geometrical shape that can hold the most amount of honey using the least amount of beeswax. And bees are strongest structure, because if bees were to construct circles for the beehives, circles don't stack, right? There will be empty space. It will be weak house. If they were to create squares, Imam Ghazali says, look at that, look at the bee. If they were to create square cells, they would stack very well, very solid structure. But haven't you seen the shape of the bee? It is curved. So that corner, 90-degree corner, would remain empty. It wouldn't be a good use of the space. He goes through and triangles and everything, goes through everything, and he says, how did the bee know? This is like, I asked in my previous talk, I gave this example, and I said, did they have bees have many international conferences to come to this hexagonal structure to be the most efficient? How did they know? So when we try to explain observable facts on the basis, like the bee is an observable fact. People can say, oh, I don't believe, this is all metaphorical. The ants, and people have written tafasirs. They have made all of these Quranic verses metaphorical in order to insert evolution into the whole process. They would say, no, this is just metaphorical. How many metaphoricals do we need? Even the Adam alayhi salam, that's just metaphorical. So that's why I say this is a very dangerous belief system, because it can take people out from Ashhadu la ilaha.
So then would you say that the main issue with evolution would be the same issue with any other modern science, that you take God away from the equation?
Yeah, that was a very good question, I thought. The difference is the difference of degrees. When you take God out of anything, obviously that is it's a problem. But there is no other theory that is so sweeping, that is so overwhelming, that is so foundational as evolution. I mean, if you have a different geological theory of how the mountains came into existence, these are processes, secondary, tertiary, fourth order processes. But if you say, well, this is how the life came into existence, then we are dealing with the most fundamental level that human beings can have. We are dealing with wujud, we are dealing with existence. If you say, well, Big Bang is a very problematic theory for that reason, because it deals with the first level. So there are secondary, tertiary levels, and there are primary levels. So anything that to deal with, I can have a theory of psychology, for example, that may be totally, there is no God in, for example, in psychology of colors, I can say, if people say, or taste or things like that, it will still be problematic, but not to the same order. Is that clear? The order matters? Like if you take the foundation of the house away, that's one thing. If you take one room out on the seventh floor, that's another thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, so this conversation obviously has gone on with Muslims, Christians. Many people have pointed out, like you say, look at the bees, look at ants, look at the cells, look at all of these things. And even, the intelligent design community have, say this it's not logical or rational to explain this as just chance. But what many of them have done is to say that they accept common ancestry, but that it is theistic evolution, God has guided it, somehow a spirit, or even if they're not religious, some kind of a spirit. So I think, but for Muslims, the issue that gets Muslims most, is most affected is the idea of common ancestry. So what do you say to people who they believe in common ancestry, but it was guided by God?
Right.
And right. God taught the ants, God taught the bees, but just the actual common ancestry is there.
Right. So the problem with that view is artificially inserting the hand of God when the hand of God is needed, and taking it out when it's not needed. That's one. Number two, when we have a coherent worldview, like Aristotle had a complete, any watertight worldview, His system was so thoroughly structured that every single level of reality, every single level of logical problem, every single level of phenomena could be explained. That's why he has survived all these centuries.
Yeah.
Except for the two things that I mentioned. I mentioned one, I haven't mentioned the second. Now I'll mention the second in response to your question as well. What we are doing here is under the tyranny of modern science and its power that we have experienced historically, personally, ecologically, emotionally, we are trying to find a way to insert our belief into somebody's house. And I think this Richard Dawkins, he says you're smuggling God from the back room.
The back
Meaning,
door.
why are we? And I think the reason is that we have not been able to explain the observable history, and we are framing the fossil records, for example. When science piled up the fossil records and all these other proofs, one upon another, over a period of almost now 2 centuries, 1857 to now. Even before that, there was similar trajectory. Darwin didn't come out of nowhere. He had a history itself. The problem is that what we are trying to do with the insertion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into somebody's house, we are renters. Landlord is someone else. We can be kicked out when the landlord says, no, okay, enough. Why do we have to do that? Because we accept the word that has been constructed over the last 2 centuries as a given. Because we didn't have a science. We didn't go and look at the fossil records ourselves. We didn't look at what Darwin looked at from our own eyes. Now that my point is the following. The Muslim Ummah has woken up. After 3 centuries of siesta, like we are awake now, and we are really like the people of the cave in Surah Al-Kahf. When they woke up, what did they do?
They look for food.
Here is the coin. Go get some food. Go get some food. Here's the coin. The person goes to the town and says, what coin? Like, where are you coming from, right? The difference is that those 309 years when the people of the cave were there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned from the kufr to belief. Like the word had changed, improved for them.
Interesting.
This is the opposite situation. We went to sleep in the 17th century, and when now we are woken up and we look at the word and we say, yes, this is the fossil record. Yes, you are saying the right thing, but let me get my God out of my pocket and put the God into your house, because I cannot live without the God. That's what we are doing.
But then, is it wrong?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I wanted to mention was the following. You see, no Muslim is going to not believe in the Qur'an, right? There is absolutely no possibility of that. What are they going to do with the fitra? So Aristotle had this second problem that I wanted to mention. First was where did the matter come from? He solved it by saying it was eternal. The second problem he had was about the human being. When you and I are born, what is our state? He said, tabula rasa, blank state. Blank slate. You can write anything on it. A child is just a blank slate. You can write anything on it. We say no. The child, every child, our Prophet ﷺ told us, every child is born upon fitra. There is a divine imprint in the child's being. Now, if you connect that imprint with alastu bi rabbikum, which all these evolutionists try to do the same, they have one single multiplier with zero. Their zero is metaphor. Right? That's the, if you multiply infinity with zero, it becomes zero. You're a mathematician. So they multiply with everything. They use the word, this was metaphorical. Alastu bi rabbikum is an ayah of the Qur'an in Surah Al-Araf. And when we say Bala, Shahidna, indeed we bear witness that you are our Lord, what is the next part of that ayah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I did this so that you wouldn't be able to say, we found our forefathers on this, therefore we don't take us to task because we didn't. No, we establish a legal covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You and me and every single human being who comes into this world with that imprint in the soul. And then if you are born in England, if you're born into a British home, if you're born into, your color becomes white and you speak English language and other people speak other languages and the color of skin are different. But fundamentally, we have a divine imprint. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the choice. He gives us the choice of reiterating that covenant or denying it. Amma shakiran or kafura. Whether we are one or the other, that is the human choice. So all these scientists, all these people, all these philosophers, everybody will say, no, there is no creator. We just came into existence through this evolutionary process. That, Big Bang happened and then the whole thing happened. That whole story is flawed from the perspective of a believer who says, no, you cannot start anything without kun fayakun. There is kun fayakun in the creation of and then the second thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna fi khalqi samawati wal ardi la ayat. There are signs, because we cannot see, when we talk of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we cannot even have a perception of his being, but we have two other domains that confirm fully confirm the worldview that I'm talking about. One is the observable physical world, the honeybee we talked about, the ants we talked about, the day coming and going of the day and the night we observe with our own eyes, the revolution of the planets. They are all kullu fi falakain yasbahun. They are all in their own planets. And then the second thing is, what is this fi anfusihim is within you and me. This is the point that no materialist is going to accept, although they experience it. You and I, every human being has an internal world, meaning it's a totally airtight, private situation, to the extent that you and I and every human being has the sense of taste. But the coffee I drank this morning, the taste I received from that cup of coffee is my personal experience, just like your cup of coffee gave you your personal experience. We can talk about it until the end of the day, end of the time, but we will never be able to communicate the experience. We can just talk about it. Example, these beautiful pomegranates that they are destroying in Iran now, the taste of that I had in my childhood, I still have that taste within me. Somebody who has never tasted pomegranate, would that person ever know the taste of it? No. Because the taste, experiential reality is personalized, individual. Now, within the human being, sanurihim fi ayatina fi anfusihim, in their own nafs, in their own being. This is where the question of evolution totally disappears, because there is an individualization. There is a unique singularity in existence of you and me. At the level of physical senses, not to talk about metaphysical being. Like you have a spirit, I have emotions, you have emotions, I have idrak, you have idrak, we have intellect, we have a whole inner world of grief and happiness and joy and relationships with the rest of the world. But this is all unique to us. This is all singular. There is a common denominator in certain areas of human existence. This is what sociologists would do. Like they would say, okay, this is the human type. Trump is one type and Pharaoh was one type, etc. Like they have all of these types made up. But no, you cannot. These are individuals who are behaving in a certain way at a certain time in their life under processes which are unique to them. And that's why if we take evolution, there are so many metaphysical implications of that theory, including the accountability, including the book that we all have. Like you and I have a book, right? What I'm saying is being written, not just on the Zoom, but angels are writing it. And we are going to see that book. And we hope what comes out of our mouth, what comes off our tongue is written on the right-hand side. If you take truth, to be your fort, your hisn, your then you start to see the trajectory of modern science from a totally different perspective. You don't take anything for given. You say, okay, you're telling me these are facts. I want to see.
So the question I have then is, like, with respect to modern science, how and when do you take into account to do something in the world, to explain the world, or to progress materially in the world? Like, how and when do you use modern science?
See, we are historical beings, meaning Muslims are historical beings. The Quran came in a given historical reality. It came in a language that already existed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it gradually over a period of 23 years in a given historical situation, which was already there, which was the product of previous times and centuries. 2026, we are sitting here in a given historical situation, and we are dealing with a body of knowledge and some technologies. We are dealing with ways of communication. We are dealing with ways of constructing our houses and clothes and food and everything, which all of these have emerged, if you could see clearly, over the last 3 centuries. If we could see the history of modern science over the last 3 centuries, as if we are sitting on moon, as if we are looking down at this whole development of a certain trajectory of development of certain type of knowledge, and ask why did Newton and Galileo, why did they came like in a certain civilization? What happened? What is the metaphysical structure of the civilization which gave rise to the modern science? If we could do that, like when we are talking about sending a whole civilization back to the Stone Age, when we are talking about that, what does that mean? It means that there is a psychological force within that civilization that creates people, that gives birth to leadership, that gives birth to a certain arrogance on the basis of this power that modern science has provided. When that power becomes so universal that there is not even a desert left now without the cell phone, there is nothing left. So when we say, well, we have to, what is halal, what is permissible, what is not permissible, what can we take, no, it's the worldview. I can still use certain procedures in my lab to investigate the human body, but from a different perspective. If I don't take modern medicine, for example, as a given, if I say the bananas that are being produced for mass production in the banana republics that the Americans have invested in, genetically modified food that we are eating now, if we say, well, wait a minute, I don't need 10 bananas. I can live with one, but give me the real thing. So it's a worldview, it's the need that has been created artificially and fed artificially at the expense of consumption, of resources, of land, of people, of energies. So there is, this is a huge question. There is no sudden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows if there is a sudden end to all of this. There could be a sudden end to this. Because, I'm a scientist by training. And that means that I understand something of the way the entire modern science and its products are working. Like you and I are talking through this distance. Everything fundamentally goes back to one single constant. And that is the electromagnetic constant. One tiny change in the magnetic field, all these electrons, everything is out. Nothing is going to work. Like you experience this, your light goes out, you go to the bank and you want your money. Oh, sorry, the system isn't working. Nothing happens without. So what we have created, and Muslim world is not an exception right now. What we have created is a huge dependency on a very flimsy foundation of electromagnetic field. So, I don't take this as a given forever, because the Pharaoh is the archetype in the Quran who claimed to be the Rabb, whichever way we explain that ayah. Ana rabbukumul ala, he said. That archetype had no idea that this morning when he woke up and he said, those slaves are running away, go after them, come. He gathers all his force and everything, he runs after them, right? Before the end of the day, he's gone. All the generations of pharaohs are gone. The history just turns upside down in one single instance, one day. So this whole current, I think the greatest thing, the only thing if I could convey to your audience today, don't take the current order of existence as permanent, as a given forever. We have historical example after example of the whole order of existence turning upside down. Historically, I'm not talking about metaphorically. I'm not talking about even Nuh alayhi salam. I'm talking about real, observable, provable history. So if we say this modern science and everything that is constructed is a historical development of unprecedented nature, obviously, there is nothing like it in human history that we know of, but it's not going to be permanent. I'm going to look at it from outside its history and say 300 years in human history is just a blink of the eye. It's just nothing. And if this whole huge system has been constructed on the basis of these powers that have come out of modern science, I'm not going to take this for granted and say, okay, this is the order that's going to stay forever. No, the earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is still in charge of every single thing that is happening. He has given us this tawfiq and the ability and the minds and the intellect to reflect on his science, to arrive at certain conclusions for ourselves, which are not the conclusions of Darwin or Trump or anybody else. That is the greatest jihad that we need to do. Then we will see the limitations of the present world order, not just of the science, but political, economic, technological, all kinds of orders which have been brought into existence. And we already see the moral decay. Like we see that every human being on this planet, including the Americans, they see the moral decay of their situation, right? Because, the power they have given, this is like Pharaoh. Ana rabbukum lala. He wakes up one day and he says this, and the next day he says this, and then and we don't deny the power. We don't deny the power of the B-52 bombers, but we refuse to accept. And this is the last thing I'll say. If we have that worldview, then our death doesn't matter. Our death is not because we are going to meet our Lord. We are going somewhere better. We have this promise. That's why I think this is the most important aspect of this current situation, where the Shahada of Imam Hussain has been kept alive in that culture, in that civilization for 1400 plus years. There is no place on earth. I've experienced it myself. You go to Iran in Muharram, the whole country is full of grief of Imam Hussain. For them, he is the symbol of truth standing up against tyranny forever and ever. And this Dr. Larijani, I sat with him several times in his office, the office of the Iranian Broadcasting Corporation that they have bombed out now. Beautiful building. He was such a polite man. He was such a wonderful human being. He goes to meet his daughter and they just kill him. So this bankruptcy can obliterate people, individuals, but those people say, we are going to meet our Lord, Bismillah. We are looking forward to it. There is no one can defeat such a perspective. So I'm saying, as a conclusion, givens of modern science, givens of the current situation, givens of the current world order are not given, should not be givens for Muslim thinkers, for Muslim masses, for people of intellect. They need to put everything through the Quranic lens and say, well, wait a minute.
If I may still ask another question to come back on that subject of evolution, then like when you look at the genetic similarities between animals and plants, what's your then reaction? Is it to see beauty And that's it? Or can you like try to find maybe a relation, correlation, or like we had in the previous podcast, signs for a similar creator?
Very, very, very important aspect of this debate that I had not touched upon. Thank you for asking. The commonality between living species that is a cornerstone of the theory of evolution can be seen from a different perspective. And that perspective comes directly from the Quran itself. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 30, Inni ja'alukum fi ardi khalifa, I am going to create a khalifa on earth, the planet Earth. This is a choice of space and species. Place is the planet Earth. Out of all the planets in the cosmos that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created, He chose planet Earth to create a species, being a certain being who did not exist before, suitable for existence on a planet called the Earth. Like many times I say to myself, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had wanted to populate the moon or the Mars or the sun, I'm sure there are Allah's creations in those places as well of different order. Like the angels are going everywhere. Because He subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings with a certain physical structure that needed. In Surah Al-Furqan, it tells us that we never sent prophets who did not eat and who did not walk on the roads, on the bazaars. So when He created us, He created the entire order of existence for this special species that He appointed as His Khalifa on this planet. In Surah Yasin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the an'am, the cattle, the horses, and like the cattle, everything that is here has to have a common chemistry. I have a PhD in chemistry, and I know that if a single atom that my body cannot, that is not in harmony with the constitution of my body, was on this earth, I wouldn't exist. No human being would exist. Even arsenic, everything has to be within my constitution in order for me to exist. So if we look at the commonality of species from this perspective, that there has to be a harmony. There has to be at the chemical level, at the very, very basic level of mechanisms of the body, there has to be compatibility with the species that we are. These things, these other forms of life that exist, especially the animals, the birds, like the living creatures, even the plants, the plant sitting behind you, it's a living creature. It's not a dead being. It has a life of its own. As we study it as a life form, if you don't give it water, it would die. Like these are now, for human beings to exist, everything has to be within that order of reality, of physically speaking. That means, and then between them, like the sheep, the lamb we eat, it doesn't exist in isolation. It has to live on this earth in relationship to others. The camels we use, everything has to be compatible with each other, and that compatibility has created this superficial conclusion that because there is this commonality, and they found the apes to be the most resembling, but I haven't seen a single ape that has produced Shakespeare's plays. This is a different order of reality we are talking about. We are talking about a cosmos, well, specifically the Earth itself, and then the Earth itself is also within the bigger system. Like that's a different discussion. But the living beings on this planet are all within a certain range of compatibility with different levels of intellect given to them. Like you see, my neighbor came yesterday and he was telling about the goats his neighbor had, and this is lambing season. So two of the goats were in a breech position, he said. Like the two babies in the goat was in a breech position. So this farmer, he just pulled them out. If he had not pulled them out, naturally they were just turned around, they wouldn't come out in the natural process. But because these goats have a certain mechanism of existence that resembles my mechanism of existence as far as their stomach is concerned, as far as their biological processes are, that makes them edible to me, to human beings. If there was discontinuity at the biological level, there would be no life possible. So that continuity is obviously at a level of, as well as you said, it's a sign. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. That ayah is at both levels. It's not just, it's, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just telling us go and investigate the camel physiologically or chemically or whatever. That is there, but it's much more than that, and that much more is the composite picture of life on this earth. Is that right? Yeah.
So taking this a bit further, then can you still maybe hope to use science to explain these processes? And then up to which point then can you use science to explain what's happening?
Right. So we can take an example from Islamic scientific tradition. What did they do? What did Ibn Haytham do? What did Ibn Sina, what did Al-Biruni do when they discovered some scientific facts like we do today? One thing is very clear. The depth of investigation that has happened over the last 300 years is unprecedented, meaning the amount of knowledge, I'm not just saying information, amount of knowledge of these processes which has been accumulated is just unprecedented. I gave you the example of my finger and going to the hospital. But this is just in the degree of detail. Degree of detail does not change the conclusion needed. It just deepens it. And the example is the following. Ibn Sina and Al-Biruni were two contemporaries. They were both, and Ibn Sina was more philosopher than he was a scientist, but he had great medical science. He left us this Al-Qanun, Al-Tib. He left us this wonderful book about medicine. But they were contemporaries and they were writing to each other. They were writing letters to each other about certain physical observations. So one of the questions they were discussing was why when water freezes, what happens to water when it freezes? Like water, if you fill a glass container with water, seal it, put it outside. They didn't have refrigeration, but they had winters. They would put it outside. In the morning, it would be ice. What happens to water? Ibn Sina said that when water freezes, there is a vacuum that is created inside because it's shrinking. So there is a vacuum that is created. Al-Biruni says, no, ya Sheikh, if there was a vacuum being created, then my flask would have imploded. And I have broken many flasks and all of them explode. Meaning when water freezes, it becomes ice. Ice is less dense than water. It needs more space. When it needs more space, it breaks the flask. Somebody in the same time frame says, look at that. If ice was not less dense than water, what would happen to the oceans? When they freeze in winter, marine life would not be possible because everything is now frozen down below the water surface. Atlantic freezes on top, but water stays. Fish go underneath. Recycling happens. Life continues. If this specific property of water was not there, life would not be possible. Marine life every winter would die, etc. Now, what did they do? They had a certain amount of scientific knowledge, and they looked at their scientific knowledge from a certain perspective. We can do the same thing now. We accept that modern science has accumulated tremendous amount of information, even knowledge, but it's the lens that we need to use to look at the same information, same processes, same understanding, but from a different perspective. So we can use modern knowledge, we can use modern science, but we need to use it from within our own worldview. Yes, you have the B-52 bombers, but I'm going to look at it. Yes, you can destroy a whole civilization, but I'm going to look at it. What's going to happen to you? Because Firaun said the same thing. And if you do that, there are consequences for you as a person, as a president, as a civilization, because you are using this knowledge that was accumulated for the wrong purpose. Imam Ghazali gives us a wonderful, wonderful example in the same book, Fi Jawahir al-Qur'an. After talking about the bee and the hexagonal structure, he says, but, travelers, wake up. You will exhaust your life if you are to run after every single singularity of the existence. You will end up like you will accumulate so much of these wonders that you would not be able to travel. Remember, why were you created? You need to draw conclusions from one single in-depth study of one thing. You don't need to run after every single example. If you have clear idea of where you are going, otherwise you're just going to be turning around one after the other thing. So when you say, what do we do with this accumulated knowledge that has been accumulated over the last 300 years? My answer is that we look at it from the Quranic perspective of utility, number one. Number two, from the perspective of afala yanzuruna ila al-ibili kayfa. If we don't have that perspective, I mean, this knowledge is just barren. It doesn't bear fruit. It may be easy for me to construct a house with that knowledge or double the yield of my bananas, but that's such a low level of ambition for a human being who has been created with this wonderful intellect to reflect on his or her creation and the journey. Because we are all on a journey, like you and I and the ants and the sun and the moon and the planet, everything is on a journey. And our destination is one single destination. And at the point of arrival, Imam Ghazali in the same book, it's a small book, but it's just full of Jawahir al-Qur'an. It's just, and he says that there are only three fundamentals in the Quran. The whole Quran is just three fundamentals. Number one is it's an invitation of the Creator to come to Him. And he says, for you to go there, you need to know the path. You need to know the road. So that's Risala, that's prophethood. That's how you get to the place. This is the roadmap. The third, he says, is the knowledge of what is going to be your state when you arrive. And there are only two possibilities at that point, either left or right, in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or forever in the other place. Now, if these things are applied to any branch of knowledge, including the modern science, we derive certain principles, we derive certain conclusions. We would not be modifying our fruit, we would not be destroying species, we would not be eating what we are eating now. Like, there would be a different kind of order of existence.
Okay. It reminds me, one of the teacher I had used to wonder why the Industrial Revolution happened in the West and not in the Muslim world. And he hopes that it's because of the moral of the people. They wanted to stick to a certain moral and to not go down that exploitation and degradation route.
Yes. And this whole idea of progress, I mean, this is fake, because وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. We are constantly, as a human race, human being, human species, and the time itself is going down, because there is no logical necessity for Qiyamah to come if we were going up and up. So what modern science has done is really accelerated the decay. Because even the food, like I was just thinking yesterday about, I don't know if you have those bananas in UK or not, but these very
It must be the
special,
same.
everything has become the same. And when I was a child, like this is even within our own lifetime. When I was a child, everything had variety. Like we had 10 different kinds of bananas and 15 different kinds of mangoes and etc. Everything. Why? Because of profit. So the skin of these bananas is so thick and they're totally tasteless. You can have an apple sitting on your counter for a whole month with the same color but there is nothing inside it. So all of these things are the products of
It
our
is a week
greed.
old.
Subhanallah. Yes. So, this worldview that we are talking about, this progress, this science, the destruction and the reach of that destruction. Like there is even in places which were immune from this destruction, even in my generation, even they are now No, gone. Totally gone. So we have to, people in the West, Muslims in the West really have a very special role to play, inshallah, because like when the Ummah started to wake up after three centuries of siyasta, there were wrong starts. Like Sayyid and Khan, like they were waking up, but they were so dazzled by what they saw. The world had changed since they went to sleep when they woke up. But we, inshallah, have better understanding of the last 300 years. So history is very important for us to understand, and history of modern science, especially. The forces, the driving force, the kinetic force of this whole enterprise of modern science. There are numbers, there are social studies of how much money goes into weapon development, how much money, like these things haven't happened just, this fellow doesn't have the button in his hand right now. These missiles and everything has history, long history behind it. And all those high level research products which are contracted to scientists in university system, they have a low level application, meaning these cell phones, for example, these laser, these microwave ovens, all of these things are very, very low level byproducts of a high level scientific research that is geared, propelled by power, by developing these. I'm just amazed at the ability of the Israelis to have the information of a person sitting in the 16th floor of an apartment in Tehran, which is a city of 16 million people. 16 million people, 16th floor of a building, and there's one single missile going to the bedroom of that apartment. Like, just think of that. The ability of the precision of that thing. And this is the shaitan. This is the evil of this use of this knowledge. And we believe they are going to be held to account by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this kind of power, if this were to be used for good of humanity, like just think of like yesterday they released the CCTV footage of a hospital in Tehran. 2 little babies were born. 30 minutes later, sirens, bombing. One nurse runs, grabs these 30-minute-old babies, holds them in like this, and runs out. An hour later, that hospital is destroyed. Totally. I saw this with my own eyes. This is a CCTV local camera released by Red Cross, running Red Cross. So the purpose of science, the purpose of knowledge, the purpose, that is integral. We cannot separate. We cannot say, okay, we are going to Islamize this science. No, we don't want those things. That's why I feel this was a mistake by Iran not to develop what they didn't develop, because the Quran says very clearly that you have to get your asla, you have to get your salah ready, because you cannot survive brute force. I mean, as a civilization, individually we survive, because when we are martyred, we go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as a civilization, Muslims need to develop means of survival. And the means of survival means what it means.
Today, yes.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Then, from my side, I believe you answered all the questions.
Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah.
And you
Yeah,
made
it's very
others
interesting. Yeah.
irrelevant.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. It's quite, I mean, we've already had some discussions with other people, and we personally have had discussions between me and Dr. Adrien Chauvet. And the questions are normally framed in a certain way, but now you're coming at it from a completely different angle, just like as if you're looking at the new question, at this question from a different angle completely, which is very, very interesting. And it's, very, very useful.
Yeah,
Mashallah.
it's
Thank you.
enlightening.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khairan.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
Jazakallah.
accept our efforts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq and ability to see the nature of
Ameen.
things as they really are, as our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam made the dua. This is, I think, the if we were to finish on one thing, that would be this dua, that Jami made it into such beautiful poem. Oh Allah, show me the nature of things as they really are. Show us the veils as veils, like veil as a veil, and grant us the ability to lift the veils. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the vision and the ability to pierce through this darkness and keep our worldview intact. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant relief to our brothers and sisters in places which are being
Ameen.
obliterated by the power of modern science in the hands of pharaohs of this time. We make dua all the
Ameen.
time, many times a day. اللهم فرج عن أمة محمد اللهم انصر أخواننا في
آمين.
الإيران فلسطين لبنان في كل مكان يا أرحم الراحمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله
آمين.
وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، السلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
سلام.
جزاك الله خير.